March 17th, 1941. North Atlantic. Convoy HX-112, 40 merchant ships carrying supplies for besieged Britain, pushes through waves 3 stories high. The captains are nervous. They know he's out there. The Germans call him Der Alte, the old man. British Admiralty tracks him by code name. Merchant sailors whisper his name with fear and grudging respect. Lieutenant Commander Otto Kretschmer, 28 years old, commanding U-99, the deadliest submarine commander of World War II. In 18 months, 47 ships sunk, 274,000 tons. A record that stands 80 years later. But tonight, his run ends. May 1st, 1912. Otto Kretschmer was born in Silesia to a schoolteacher. Nothing suggested this quiet boy would become history's most successful submarine commander. He dreamed of the sea, of ships and distant horizons. In 1930, at 18, he left home to become a sailor. 6 years at Naval Academy. Kretschmer didn't stand out, but instructors noted certain qualities: calmness, methodical thinking, ability to keep his head when others lost theirs. When Admiral Dönitz began building Germany's submarine fleet in 1935, he looked for intelligent, fearless officers capable of operating independently. Kretschmer volunteered in 1936. His first boat, U-23, a small coastal submarine. September 1st, 1939. War began. Kretschmer was 27. His first sinking defined his approach. A Danish coal ship bound for England. Legitimate target. But before firing, Kretschmer surfaced, verified cargo, gave the crew time to evacuate. Only then ordered the torpedo launch. Ship went down. Danish sailors survived. For Kretschmer, this wasn't mercy. It was adherence to the centuries-old code of naval warfare. An enemy ship is a legitimate target. Survivors in the water are not. He followed this rule throughout the war. Spring 1940. U-23 sank a British destroyer. In April, new orders. Report to Kiel. U-99, an ocean-going Type 7B submarine, 67 meters of steel, crew of 44, range of 8,700 miles. The entire Atlantic was now his hunting ground. Life on a submarine was brutal. 44 men in a steel tube for 2 months without daylight. Diesel fumes, unwashed bodies, moldy bread. Temperature either freezing or 120 degrees near the engines. One toilet with complex valves. And always constant fear. Depth charges exploding overhead, hull shaking, seals leaking. 75% of submarine crews wouldn't make it home. Highest casualty rate in the Wehrmacht. But with Kretschmer, the crew felt confident. He never took unnecessary risks. Every decision calculated. Every attack planned to the last detail. During his first patrols, Kretschmer realized something important. Most commanders fired spreads of 3 or 4 torpedoes, hoping one would hit. Kretschmer considered this wasteful. His philosophy: 1 torpedo, 1 ship. Get close enough, keep your nerve. But this meant getting much closer than was considered safe. This willingness to take calculated risks made him unmatched. September 1940, convoy HX-72. In complete darkness at 10:30 p.m., U-99 went at full speed straight into the convoy. 500 meters, 400, 300. Suddenly, U-99 was inside the convoy formation, moving among merchant ships. The escort patrolled outside, not suspecting the wolf was among the sheep. 2 hours. 7 torpedoes. 7 ships. Kretschmer maneuvered between burning hulks, while the escort panicked. By 3 a.m., the submarine slipped away undetected. This wasn't war. It was surgery. October brought the peak. Convoy SC-7. A wolf pack of 7 boats. In 48 hours, the convoy lost 20 ships out of 30. Kretschmer personally sank 6. 6 torpedoes, 6 sinkings. 100% efficiency. An old British captain would later write, "We saw flashes one after another, like someone methodically turning off lights. Ship after ship went down. We knew it was him, the ghost of the Atlantic. But there was another side, what went unspoken. Every evening, Kretschmer looked up the names of ships he'd sunk, found them in registries, learned how many crew, how many survived, how many died. Once, a petty officer asked why. Kretschmer stared at the water for a long time, then answered, "Because they were just like us." Sailors. They didn't choose this war. Their deaths were a necessity of war. But that's no reason for indifference. November 1940. SS Patroclus, 11,000 tons. 1 torpedo. Direct hit. Ship sinking. U-99 could have left, mission accomplished, but through the periscope, Kretschmer saw men in the water. He ordered surface. Searchlights illuminated British sailors. They expected death. But Kretschmer called out in English, "Don't be afraid. We won't harm you. We're here to help." Sailors threw ropes, life jackets, food, water. Kretschmer called out a course. 270 degrees. Ireland 200 miles. A young British sailor shouted, "Why are you helping us? You're Germans. We're enemies." Kretschmer paused. "Because the war isn't against you personally. You're just sailors like us. No reason to let you drown when the battle's over." That sailor survived and told this story again and again. He was a gentleman, even in the hell of war. There were 7 such cases. British intelligence gathered testimony. The picture was contradictory. On one hand, ruthless operator sinking multiple ships per night. On the other, night following all rules of naval warfare, never attacking lifeboats, often helping survivors. In London, an admiral threw down his pencil. "This one man is sinking more than 10 other boats combined. He's a threat to Britain's survival." A young intelligence officer noted, "Sir, there's never been a report of attacks on lifeboats. 7 cases where he helped survivors." The admiral said wearily, "A professional is more dangerous than a fanatic. But it makes him a worthy opponent. When we catch him, he'll be treated with respect." By late 1940, the order was clear. Find and destroy U-99 at any cost. Kretschmer became target number 1. U-99's tally: 38 ships sunk, 220,000 tons. But Kretschmer felt the war was changing. The golden time was passing. Radar getting better. More escort ships. Aircraft patrols. And the Enigma break, which the Germans didn't know about, allowed the British to read Donitz's orders. March 1941. Kretschmer received orders for his 8th patrol. A premonition stirred that this might be the last. But he dismissed it as superstition. March 10th. U-99. Left for the gray waters of the Bay of Biscay. Weather was terrible. 20-foot waves, hurricane winds, 0 visibility. March 16th. Coded message. Convoy OB-293 spotted. Wolf pack to concentrate by midnight. 8 boats, including U-100, commanded by Joachim Schepke, Kretschmer's friend. Over radio, Schepke joked, "Otto, I'll bet you a case of champagne I get more kills." Kretschmer replied, "You're on, Joachim. Just don't cheat." Both laughed, not knowing this was their last conversation. On the other side, Commander Donald McIntyre, commanding the 5th Escort Group, prepared with determination. McIntyre had studied Kretschmer's tactics for months. His ships, destroyers HMS Walker and HMS Vanek, equipped with new Type 271 radar, improved sonar, new depth charges. McIntyre told his officers, "If Kretschmer's here, we have a chance that may not come again. He's bold, perhaps too bold. Gets closer than is safe. That's his weakness." 10 p.m., March 16th. The group joined the convoy. McIntyre knew somewhere out there, the ghost of the Atlantic was hunting. 10:30 p.m. U-99 reached position. Through the periscope, Kretschmer assessed. Convoy in 5 columns, escort patrolling. The commander knows his business. But the night is dark. Storm interferes with radar. Prepare torpedoes. Course 290. Full ahead. U-99 at 17 knots headed for the convoy. On HMS Walker, a young radar operator suddenly saw a blip. Weak. Flickering. Bearing 340, 5,000 meters. Contact! Target on screen, moving toward convoy at 17 knots. McIntyre was at the screen instantly. His heart raced. It's him! It's Kretschmer. Nobody else approaches like this in this weather. Battle stations. Walker turned and raced through the storm at 32 knots. Kretschmer on the bridge suddenly felt something wrong. That sixth sense. Raised binoculars. He saw them. 2 searchlights approaching at incredible speed. They know where he is. Emergency dive. Everyone down. We have seconds. U-99 began diving, but the boat was heavy. Tanks filled slower than usual. Too slow. Walker's radar held contact. Mark, dive position, McIntyre shouted. Walker passed directly over U-99. 8 depth charges flew from the stern. The ocean erupted. Inside U-99 at 70 meters, the world became hell. Explosions so close it felt like a giant hammering the hull. Sound deafening, physically painful. Boat thrown sideways, light bulbs bursting, glass flying, water jets bursting inside. Chief engineer shouting, "Damage stern! Steering, not responding. Can't control depth." U-99 began uncontrolled fall. 100 meters, 120, 150, 170, 190. Hull making nightmare sounds. Rivets popping like gunshots. Maximum safe depth 200 meters. Hull fatigued, microcracks everywhere. "Blow all ballast tanks," Kretschmer shouted, maintaining calm though feeling cold fear. "Emergency surface." It's our only chance. Compressed air roared into the tanks. U-99 slowed its fall, hung at 220 meters, just 20 from the limit. Then jerked upward uncontrollably fast. 1:40 a.m., March 17th. U-99 burst to the surface helpless and mortally wounded, rolling like a harpooned whale. Stern already underwater, obviously sinking. HMS Vanek's searchlights found the submarine. The crew saw the distinctive emblem, a golden horseshoe. It's her. 99. It's Kretschmer. We've caught the ghost. Kretschmer climbed onto the bridge, assessed professionally. Boat sinking, 2 destroyers 200 meters away. Vanek ready to ram. 2 minutes maximum. All hands abandon ship. Quick, organized, life jackets, help the wounded. 44 men began evacuation, jumping into ice-cold water, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Kretschmer went below one last time, walked through the control room, touched the dive wheel, looked at the chart marking all victories, opened the Kingston valves so the boat would go down fast. Water began flooding. Cold, black, salty. He climbed out, looked one last time at the golden horseshoe disappearing into water. HMS Vanek headed for a ram. The destroyer's huge bow approaching. 10 seconds. Jump or die. He jumped in the last second. Went under from impact. Salt water burned his lungs. Cold squeezed his chest. He stroked upward, broke surface, gasped for air. Saw U-99 going under stern first. Last thing he saw, golden horseshoe flashing in searchlights and vanishing into the abyss forever. The British ships began rescue operations, an unwritten law of the sea. Even enemies deserve saving when the battle is over. 3 German submariners drowned before rescue arrived. The remaining 38 survived, pulled out soaked, frozen, barely alive, wrapped in blankets, given hot tea with rum. Kretschmer was lifted last, refused help climbing the ladder, stood on Walker's deck at full height, shivering, but maintaining commander's dignity, refusing to show weakness even now. McIntyre came out to meet the famous captive. They stood face to face for the first time. British captain dry and victorious. German lieutenant commander soaked and defeated. Both professionals of the highest class. McIntyre did something that broke protocol. Extended his hand. An honor to meet you, Commander Kretschmer. You were a worthy opponent. The best I've fought. Kretschmer shook the hand. Thank you, Captain. I hope I didn't cause too much trouble. I was just doing my job, as were you. McIntyre laughed. Trouble? More than enough. You were a nightmare for the entire Western Command. But it's over now. Come below. Then a glass of whiskey. Fleet tradition. That same night, an hour later, HMS Vanek detected another contact. U-100 commanded by Joachim Schepke. Vanek attacked. When Vanek rammed the submarine, the destroyer's bow struck directly into the conning tower. Schepke was caught between metal and hull, crushed by tons of steel. Died instantly. When Kretschmer was told about Schepke's death, he stood at the porthole in silence, stared at the dark water. Nobody saw his face, but everyone noticed his shoulders trembling. For a friend, for a comrade. Two legends in one night. U-99 sunk, commander captured. U-100 sunk, commander dead. Symbolic end of the golden time for submariners. Kretschmer was sent first to Britain for interrogation, then across the Atlantic to Camp Bowmanville in Ontario. 6 years from 1941 to 1947, living through the entire war behind barbed wire. In camp, conditions for officers were relatively comfortable. Separate barracks, decent food, sports, library. Kretschmer used the time to learn fluent English. Read from Shakespeare to Agatha Christie. Organized lectures. Maintained discipline and morale. In 1943, he organized a famous escape attempt through a tunnel dug for months. 40 meters, almost to the fence. When time came to escape, Kretschmer as senior officer could go first. But he ordered young officers to go ahead. Took a place at the end. Before his turn, Canadian guards discovered the tunnel. Attempt failed meters from success. Why didn't he run first? He always answered. The war was heading toward its end. Germany was losing on all fronts. Why risk young lives to return months earlier to a homeland lying in ruins? In captivity, he thought deeply. Analyze the war. His decisions. Those 47 ships he'd sunk. Those people who died. He reached a conclusion he wrote secretly in his diary. The war was a mistake. Hitler led Germany to catastrophe. The Nazi regime was criminal. Though I fought honorably and take pride in my professionalism, I don't take pride in serving such a regime. My only justification is that I didn't know the full truth about concentration camps and genocide when I fought at sea. May 1945. News came of surrender, Hitler's suicide, Soviet troops in Berlin. Kretschmer wasn't surprised. He'd expected it for 2 years. And in some sense, he felt relief. The madness had ended. The bloodshed stopped. Kretschmer gathered the German officers and gave a speech many remembered forever. Gentlemen, the war is over. Germany has capitulated. Each must decide how to live forward. We can cling to the past and hate the victors, poisoning ourselves with bitterness. Or accept reality and build a new future. I choose the second. I want my country to rise from ruins, democratic and peaceful. We were soldiers who did our duty. But now our duty is different. To help Germany become a country that can be respected, not for military power, but for peaceful achievements. In 1947, Kretschmer was released home. When he crossed the border and saw his homeland, even prepared for the worst, he was shocked. Cities in ruins. Hamburg, Cologne, Dresden, Berlin, 70% destroyed. Millions dead, wounded, refugees. Industry destroyed. He found his family alive, but having lost everything. House destroyed. The reunion after 6 years was joyful and bitter. 35 years old, but he had nothing except combat experience as a submariner. Useless in peacetime. Country occupied. Fleet destroyed and forbidden. For several years he worked various jobs. Tried trading. Worked at the port as a dock worker. Anything to feed his family. Humiliating for a man who'd commanded a submarine and held the highest decorations. But he did it without complaint. As a former Wehrmacht officer, He underwent denazification. Allied commissions checked everyone who served. He proved he was never a party member, committed no crimes, observed Geneva Convention. British sailors he'd saved wrote letters confirming his honorable behavior. The commission cleared him. In the 1950s, when West Germany began rebuilding armed forces within NATO, Adenauer created a new fleet, the Bundesmarine. Kretschmer was invited to return to service, despite having fought under the Nazi regime. A difficult moral choice. On one hand, he was a sailor to his core. On the other, he'd sworn never to serve a militaristic state. But the new Germany was democratic. After reflection, he accepted with the condition he would serve only democracy and NATO. Never participate in revanchism. He returned to the fleet in 1955 at 43. Started from junior positions to earn respect, honestly. Advancement was slow. Many in NATO viewed former German officers with suspicion. But Kretschmer patiently proved through professionalism that the new Germany wasn't the Third Reich. Gradually, he won trust. 1958. Captain, command of a frigate. 1961. Squadron captain. 1963. Rear admiral. 1965. Vice admiral and NATO Joint Staff for Naval Operations in the North Atlantic. Irony of fate. The man who sank British convoys now planned how to protect those convoys from Soviet submarines. This transformation symbolized Europe's change from enmity to cooperation. In the 1960s, former enemies began meeting at veteran gatherings. Kretschmer began receiving invitations to Britain. At first, he hesitated, fearing hostility, but decided to go because he believed reconciliation was more important than comfort. The first meeting in London, in 1962, was tense. British merchant fleet veterans. Some turned away at the sight of a German admiral. Some looked with barely concealed hostility. Kretschmer understood. Their pain was real. They'd lost comrades, spent hours in ice-cold water, watched ships burn. He was the cause. But he came not to apologize for fighting, but to show he remembered, respected their courage. Gradually, the ice melted. One old captain approached, looked him in the eyes for a long time, then extended his hand. "You sank my ship in October 40. I was in the water 4 hours. Lost 17 crew members. Hated you for 20 years. But now I see not a monster, but an old sailor just like me. Time to let go off the hatred. It only poisons me." Kretschmer shook the hand. This gesture opened the floodgates. Others approached, asked questions about the war, tactics, life on a submarine. He answered honestly. Said war was hell for all participants. That he did his job but took no pleasure in killing. That each sunken ship weighed on his conscience. By evening's end, former enemies sat at the same table, drank beer, exchanged stories, laughed about shared memories. Someone said this was the real victory, when hatred is overcome by understanding. Kretschmer began regularly attending such meetings. These meetings became an important part of reconciliation between Germany and Britain. In the 1970s, he met McIntyre's widow. McIntyre had died in 1956. They talked about that night in March, 1941. She said her husband always spoke of Kretschmer with respect, called him the greatest opponent, regretted circumstances made them enemies. Kretschmer confessed he felt the same, that if not for the war, they could have been friends. The widow replied her husband thought so too. In 1975, British Merchant Navy veterans invited Kretschmer to speak at their annual conference. Standing before hundreds who'd survived torpedo attacks, he delivered a carefully prepared speech. "I stand before you as a man who caused you pain and suffering. I sank 47 ships. On them were people, your comrades, friends. Some died. I bear responsibility. I don't ask forgiveness because there is no forgiveness for killing, even in war under orders. But I want you to know that I remember. I never forgot. Every ship, every day is imprinted in my memory forever. I was young. 27 when the war began. I believed I was serving my country. I didn't know then the full truth about the regime I served, about the crimes committed in my people's name. But ignorance is no excuse. I must live with this burden. The only thing I can do now is teach the young that war is not a solution, that nationalism and militarism lead to catastrophe, that peace is always better than the most just war. The hall sat in complete silence. Some cried openly. When he finished, several seconds of silence. Then, one person stood and began applauding. Gradually, the entire hall stood. The applause was recognition of the courage it took to come there and say these words. In 1982, he received an unprecedented award, made an honorary member of the Royal Naval College in Greenwich, Britain. A unique case where a former enemy commander received such honor from the country he'd fought against. A retired British admiral gave a speech. Today, we honor not war, but peace. Otto Kretschmer was our opponent and caused enormous damage, but he fought honorably. After the war, he became a bridge between our peoples, proof that former enemies can become partners. Kretschmer lived a long life, much longer than most submariner comrades, 75% of whom died. He lived to see the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, saw Germany's reunification in 1991, saw how the country he'd defended by such terrible methods became a peaceful democracy and engine of a united Europe. For a man who remembered divided, occupied, starving Germany of 1945, this was almost a miracle. He died August 5, 1998, at 86 in a house in Stralsund in northern Germany, a small town by the sea that was his first and last love. He passed quietly in his sleep. His last words to his wife the day before: "I've lived too long, seen too much, war and peace, hatred and reconciliation, destruction and restoration. I'm grateful I lived to see these days when Europe finally lives in peace." The funeral took place a week later. Representatives from German, British, and American naval forces attended, admirals and officers from a dozen NATO countries, veterans from both sides, German submariners and British merchant sailors. People who once tried to kill each other now stood shoulder to shoulder. Retired British Admiral Sir Geoffrey gave the farewell speech. Otto Kretschmer was the greatest submarine commander in human history, an undisputed fact recognized even by those who fought against him. In 18 months, he sank 47 ships, totaling 274,000 tons. A record no one has beaten in 80 years, and probably never will. But his true greatness isn't in the number of ships sunk. It's in how he conducted this war, following the rules even when dangerous, maintaining humanity even in the hell of total war, never descending to cruelty or war crimes, saving surviving enemies at risk to his own safety. This required no less courage than attacking convoys, perhaps even more, because it's easy to become a beast in war, hard to remain human. And his greatness was in how he lived after the war, building bridges between former enemies, proving by example that reconciliation is possible, that the past can be overcome, not forgotten, but forgiven, that former enemies can become friends if they want their children to live in peace. I fought against him, lost comrades to his torpedoes, have every reason to hate this man, but instead, I respect him, admire him, consider him a model of what a military officer should be in a democratic society, a professional who serves his country, but not blindly. Otto Kretschmer showed us that even in humanity's darkest times, it's possible to preserve honor and dignity, that professionalism doesn't exclude humanity, that mastery in the art of war doesn't mean love of war. His legacy isn't just tactical methods studied in naval academies, not just records in history books, but a lesson every military person, every politician, every citizen should remember. No war, no hatred, no bloodshed should be eternal. Reconciliation is always possible if both sides are willing. Memory of the past is important, but it shouldn't poison the present with endless hatred. Greatness is measured not only by victories, but by generosity after victory. Not only by strength, but by wisdom. Not only by the ability to wage war, but by the ability to forgive. The coffin was draped with the flags of Germany and NATO. An honor guard of German and British sailors gave final military honors. Otto Kretschmer was buried in a small cemetery overlooking the Baltic Sea. On the headstone, sailor, who served his country, respected his opponent, loved the sea. His records remain unbroken 80 years later. No submariner in any country has even come close to 274,000 tons, and probably never will. The era of torpedo attacks on convoys is gone forever. Modern submarines are armed with missiles and designed for different tasks. The hunt Kretschmer conducted will never be repeated. But his real legacy isn't in numbers and records. It's in the example he showed, the lesson he taught, the bridge he built between past and future, between war and peace, between hatred and understanding. His story shows that greatness is measured not only by military victories, but by moral choices. That true professionalism includes ethics and humanity. That the most dangerous enemy can become the most loyal friend if there's courage to extend a hand of reconciliation. His story teaches us that even in the darkest times, even when hatred seems the only possible feeling toward the enemy, even then, it's possible to preserve dignity, honor, and respect. That professionalism doesn't require cruelty. That mastery doesn't exclude mercy. And perhaps the most important lesson, no war, no enmity, no bloodshed should be eternal. Reconciliation is possible and necessary. Former enemies can and should become partners in building a better future. On March 17, 1941, in the cold waters of the Atlantic, the legend of U-99 ended. The Golden Horseshoe went to the bottom. But another story began. How the greatest enemy became a respected ally. How hatred turned into friendship. How war gave birth to peace. This story deserves to be told. Not to glorify war, but to remind us of the price of peace. Not to exalt killing, but to understand the value of life. Not to stir hatred, but to build bridges between nations. Today, when the world is again full of conflicts, when old wounds reopen and new ones are inflicted, Otto Kretschmer's story reminds us that a way out always exists. That reconciliation is always possible. That former enemies can become friends if they have courage to look each other in the eye and see not a monster, but a person just like themselves. His legacy is a living reminder that peace is possible, that hatred isn't eternal, that humanity is stronger than war. Otto Kretschmer, 1912 to 1998. From a quiet boy dreaming of the sea to legend of submarine warfare to builder of peace, his path is the path of the entire 20th century, with its horrors and hopes, wars and peace, destruction and reconstruction. His story doesn't end at the bottom of the Atlantic in March 1941. It ends here and now in each of us who hears this story and makes a choice between hatred and understanding, between war and peace, between the past that pulls us back and the future that calls us forward.